American voters have given Donald Trump a partial rebuke in the midterm elections.
Welcome to Plain English, the podcast that goes at the right speed for English language learners. Listen now and read the transcript online at plainenglish.com. Now, here's Jeff, your host for today's episode.
In the first national elections since Donald Trump took office, opposition Democrats took control of the House of Representatives. But it wasn't quite the wave election they were hoping for. Greetings, everyone. I'm Jeff. Welcome back to Plain English for Thursday, November 15th, 2018. This is episode 103, and you can find a transcript of this program at plainenglish.com/103. As always, that comes with our interactive translations of the hardest words and phrases from English into Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, French, Italian, and Japanese. That's at plainenglish.com/103. The big news this week was obviously the American midterm elections. I was in Canada for most of the week, and this was the big news there. So, although I generally don't love talking about American politics on this program, I thought if this is the big news even outside the United States, I probably should do at least one episode on it. So here we are. A couple of quick reminders before we get started. Make sure to sign up for our email program in which JR and I send out a summary of each new episode, the definition of one additional word or phrase that I use in the episode, and links to English articles about the main topic. You can get all that for free right to your mailbox by going to plainenglish.com/mail, M-A-I-L. And JR and I love hearing from you on Facebook and Twitter under the username Plain English Pod on both. So don't be shy about sending us a note on there. By now, you've probably heard the news about the U.S. midterm elections, in which voters gave what I would call a partial rebuke to President Donald Trump. It was the first time the whole country went to the polls since the controversial president took office in 2016, and the results let both Democrats and Republicans, the two main political parties here, claim a partial victory, but both suffered partial losses. We elect presidents here every 4 years. Our legislature has a staggered election schedule. The larger House of Representatives, with 435 members, is up for election every 2 years, while 1/3 of the 100-member Senate is up every 2 years, meaning each senator serves 6 years, but their re-elections are staggered evenly every 2 years. The first election after a new president takes office is often considered a referendum on that president's first 2 years. It is common for the president's party to lose seats in this first midterm election. The last time we had one of these was in 2010, when Barack Obama's party lost 63 seats in the House of Representatives and 6 seats in the Senate. So with that historical trend in mind, Democrats were hoping for what they called a blue wave, so-called because on the maps showing election results, Democrats are shown in blue and Republicans in red. The blue wave many Democrats were hoping for did not materialize, but the party did win some important victories. They retook a majority in the House of Representatives for the first time since 2010. They needed to win a net gain of 23 seats to have a majority in that chamber, and they have won 38 seats. Depending on how some recounts go, they may be able to increase that to 40. So they will have a comfortable majority in the House of Representatives, what we call the lower house of our legislature. For the Democrats, the Senate would have been the big prize of the night, since the Senate has more power to stop a president's agenda. In this case, however, the Republicans gained a net of 3 seats, expanding their majority to 53-47 or 54-46, depending on the recounts. Democrats can count several other victories, though. They won several governorships of important states, and their issues won on so-called ballot initiatives, where a direct question goes on the ballot for voters in a given state. For example, questions about raising the minimum wage, legalizing marijuana, and expanding medical coverage for the poor all won support from voters in individual states. So now that the dust has settled, where does this leave Trump and his adversaries? The Democrats have a majority in one chamber of our national legislature, though not the more powerful chamber. Democrats can use their new power to press their own agenda, hold hearings, and investigate the president, his businesses, and his personal finances. Divided government is the norm in American politics. For 6 out of Barack Obama's 8 years, and for 6 out of George W. Bush's 8 years, the opposition party held at least one chamber of the legislature. So this situation is not too unusual. The president and his adversaries can either try to find common ground and pass parts of an agenda that both sides agree on, or they can spend the next 2 years fighting it out, trying to win the presidential election in 2020. Although Donald Trump is a Republican now, and although many Democrats really, really hate him, there are some things both sides could agree on if they put their minds to it. New funding for infrastructure comes to mind. That tends to be popular on both sides. There is probably also room for both sides to negotiate on immigration reform. Trump was a Democrat for most of his life, so I suspect there are some deals to be done if both sides want it. However, Trump thrives on controversy and combat. That's how he got where he is today. So part of me thinks he's probably glad the Democrats took one chamber of the legislature, since he'll now have a place to focus his criticism in the final 2 years of his first term. It's sometimes said here that the day after an election is when the next campaign starts. Just part of modern political life here, I guess. So the next big elections will be in 2020. There will be a lot of Democrats who want to run against Trump. Several have begun campaigning already. The 72-year-old Mr. Trump will have to decide if he wants to run for a second term, which would end when he is 78 years old. I know a lot of you listen in the car and on your commutes. I hear that all the time from listeners. Just last week, we had a listener who said he commutes an hour and a half each way in the car to his job. I suspect that's not that unusual, especially for those of you in Latin America. My commute is about 45 to 50 minutes door to door, and I tend to read since I take the train from my home in Albany Park here in Chicago to my office in downtown. But since a lot of you listen while you commute in your cars, you might be interested in trying out an audiobook. And when I mentioned this in the past, I suggested maybe you try one in English. And that's a great idea if you're ready for something a little faster paced. But I noticed today that there are tons of books in other languages on Audible, including Portuguese, Spanish, Chinese, French, German, lots of languages. So, if you have a long commute or find yourself able to listen for longer periods of time, you might like to try listening to audiobooks. It's a great value at Audible, about $15 a month, but you get a month and one full audiobook for free if you sign up for a free trial. No pressure if you don't want to actually pay after your first free month is over. But if you want to try that out, visit plainenglish.com/book, B-O-O-K, and you can see the details there, plainenglish.com/book. Before our expression today, I wanted to say hi to a few listeners. Feta from Turkey says she's an audio-visual learner and doesn't do as well with written books as she does with audio programs. You know, as someone who reads constantly, I never really thought about the fact that some of you might learn differently. So I'm glad to be able to help out anyone who might be in the same situation as Feta. Also, hello to Johannes from Germany, Stefano from Sardinia, Italy, Rui from Brazil, and Thomas from Germany, who left a nice review for us on Facebook. I've got a good expression for you today. When the dust settles. This is what you say when you describe those first moments of calm and clarity after a period of confusion or activity. We just had a big election in which 435 seats in our House of Representatives, 35 seats in our Senate, 36 state governorships, and hundreds of state representatives were chosen. There was a long campaign, a long election night over our 6 time zones, and even the next day, there were still some votes being counted. A lot of confusion, a lot of activity, a lot was up for grabs, up in the air, but after the dust settled, the Democrats had won control of the House of Representatives, and the Republicans had expanded their majority in the Senate. After all the confusion, after all the activity, after the dust settled, it was a partial victory for Democrats. I did a Google News search for this phrase, and the majority of the examples were related to the U.S. elections or to individual sports games. If you watch ice hockey, you know that it's common for players to fight on the ice. When the fight is over, when the dust settles, the players involved get penalties and the game resumes. The fights, by the way, are JR's favorite part of watching a hockey game. You may remember tech giants Apple and Samsung were in a long court battle. Apple says that Samsung copied its phone and tablet designs. They fought in court for 7 long years, but when the dust settled, Samsung had to pay Apple over $500 million in damages. Do you remember at the Oscars a couple of years ago, they announced the wrong winner of Best Picture? Presenters Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway announced that La La Land had won Best Picture because they were given the wrong envelope. Remember that? There was confusion on the stage, but after the dust settled, it was actually the movie Moonlight that had won. Before we go, I got a question from a listener, and I answered it by email. But I figured that since Maya had the question, maybe some of you had the same question. Maya wanted to know, what does the word though mean when it's at the end of a sentence? Though is THOUGH, or if you see it on social media, sometimes people just say THO, though. When though is at the end of a sentence, it means the same as the word but when it appears at the beginning of a sentence. So I'm going to give you 3 examples. I love that bag. It's really expensive though. That means I love that bag, but it's really expensive. I had such a fun time at the hockey game. The Chicago Blackhawks lost, though. That means I had a fun time at the game, but the Blackhawks lost. Last one. I love Mexico City, where Maya lives. It's got so much traffic, though. That's all for today. Thanks again for being with us. I love being with you every Monday and Thursday. It's time to wrap up for today, though. Don't forget to join us again on Monday when we'll talk about the movie A Star is Born. Click subscribe in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the program, and you will never miss an episode. Have a great day, great weekend, and we'll be back with you in just a few short days from now.